Hey there! Welcome back to Beyond Words. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because today's story is one you won't forget anytime soon. Before we get started, I want to ask you something. Where are you from? Are you watching this from a cozy apartment in Chicago, a sunny beach in Florida, or maybe somewhere across the globe like London or Sydney? Let me know in the comments below. I love hearing from all of you. Now, imagine this. You've just walked out of prison after 7 long years. The world feels both huge and terrifying at the same time. That's where our story begins, with Michael Johnson, a man who lost nearly a decade of his life for a crime he didn't commit. But here's the twist. What happens next isn't about revenge or bitterness. It's about courage, kindness, and how doing the right thing can change everything. Michael stepped out of the prison gates, squinting against the sunlight that felt too bright after 7 years behind bars. He carried nothing but a duffel bag stuffed with old clothes and a heart heavy with questions. Freedom wasn't sweet. It was sharp, like biting into something sour. The world had moved on without him. Smartphones buzzed in everyone's hands, cars zipped by faster than he remembered, and people looked at him differently. At the diner where he worked washing dishes, whispers followed him everywhere. "That's the ex-con," someone muttered once, loud enough for him to hear. But Michael didn't let bitterness consume him. Every night, alone in his tiny rented room, he stared at faded photos of happier times. Before the betrayal, before the trial, before his life unraveled. In those quiet moments, he dreamed of starting over, of proving to the world that he was more than his past. Little did he know, his chance to rewrite his story was closer than he thought. And it would come on a cold, rainy night that changed everything. It was one of those nights where the rain came down in sheets, soaking through Michael's hoodie and pooling in his shoes. His stomach growled. He couldn't afford dinner tonight, but he kept walking, head down, lost in thoughts of how to survive another day. Then, cutting through the storm, came a scream, sharp, terrified, coming from an alley just ahead. Michael froze. His heart pounded as his mind raced. Should he run? Hide? No one would blame him if he did. After all, he'd already paid for crimes he didn't commit. Why risk getting involved now? But then he heard it again. A desperate cry for help. Without thinking, adrenaline surged through him, and he ran toward the noise. In the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, he saw her. A young woman cornered by 2 men wearing masks. One held a knife, its blade glinting menacingly in the rain. She was backed against the wall, clutching her purse like it was her only lifeline. Her wide, terrified eyes locked onto his. For a split second, fear gripped Michael. These guys could kill him. They wouldn't hesitate. But then he looked at the woman's face. So young, so scared, and something inside him clicked. "Hey!" he shouted, stepping into the alley. His voice echoed louder than he expected. The attackers turned, startled. For a moment, no one moved. Then one lunged at Michael, swinging the knife wildly. Adrenaline took over. Michael grabbed a nearby trash can lid and used it to block the blade, sparks flying as metal met metal. The fight was chaotic. Punches flew, feet slipped in puddles, and rain soaked them all. One attacker landed a punch to Michael's ribs, sending pain shooting through his side. Another swung the knife dangerously close to his throat. Just when it seemed like they might overpower him, Michael spotted a loose brick on the ground. Grabbing it, he swung with all his strength, catching one attacker square in the jaw. The man stumbled back, dropping the knife. The other hesitated, then bolted into the shadows. Breathing hard, Michael turned to the woman. She collapsed into tears, gasping for air. "Thank you," she choked out. "You saved my life." Before Michael could respond, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have heard the commotion and called the police. "I need to go," Michael muttered, backing away. He couldn't risk being questioned, not with his record. "No, wait," the woman pleaded, grabbing his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong despite her trembling fingers. "Please don't go. You're hurt. Let me call an ambulance." Michael hesitated. Trust didn't come easy to him these days. But exhaustion won out, and he nodded weakly. Paramedics arrived quickly, along with a couple of officers. While they patched him up, the woman stayed by his side, refusing to leave until she knew he was okay. "My name's Emily," she said softly as they waited for the ambulance to take him to the hospital. "Emily Carter. I can't thank you enough for what you did tonight. Just doing what anyone else would have done," Michael mumbled, avoiding her gaze. Emily shook her head fiercely. "No, not everyone would have done that. You're brave, Michael. Braver than most." Her words caught him off guard. No one had called him brave in a very long time. As the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, Emily promised, "This isn't over. I owe you more than just a thank you." She stood under the flickering street lamp, watching until the ambulance disappeared around the corner. Pulling out her phone, she dialed a number. "Dad," she said softly, "we need to talk. Something happened tonight, and I think you're going to want to hear about it." The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and stale air. Michael lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. His arm was bandaged, and his ribs ached with every breath, but he was alive. That was more than he could say for how he'd felt just days ago. Emily visited him every day. She brought coffee, snacks, and stories about her life. At first, Michael didn't know what to make of her kindness. People didn't usually go out of their way for someone like him. Not anymore. But Emily wasn't like most people. One afternoon, she sat by his bedside, flipping through a magazine. "You know," she said suddenly, "you remind me of my dad." Michael raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "He always says that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing the right thing even when you're scared." She smiled softly. "That's exactly what you did for me." Michael shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to compliments. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," Emily said firmly. "Not everyone would have stepped in like that. You risked your life for a stranger. That's not nothing." Her words lingered in the air as she changed the subject. "By the way, my dad wants to meet you. He's flying in tomorrow." Michael froze. "Your dad? Why does he want to meet me?" "He's curious," Emily said with a shrug. "And grateful. Trust me, you'll like him." But Michael wasn't so sure. What did a rich guy like Emily's father want with someone like him? The next day, Richard Carter walked into Michael's hospital room. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with confidence. His sharp eyes scanned the room before landing on Michael. "So, you're the man who saved my daughter," Richard said, extending his hand. Michael hesitated before shaking it. "Yes, sir. I'm glad she's okay." Richard nodded slowly, studying him. "Emily told me everything. About the alley, the attackers, and how you stepped in without hesitation." "It was the right thing to do," Michael muttered, looking down. "The right thing," Richard repeated thoughtfully. Then, after a pause, he added, "Not many people would have done that, especially not someone in your position." Michael stiffened. "What do you mean, my position?" "I know about your past," Richard admitted. "Emily mentioned it. And frankly, I looked into it myself." Anger flared inside Michael. "Why? To see if I'm trustworthy? To judge me?" "No," Richard said calmly. "To understand you better. Because men like you, men who face hardship and still choose to do good, are rare. And I respect that." Michael blinked, caught off guard. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. Richard leaned forward. "Listen, I have resources. If there's anything I can do to help clear your name, or give you a fresh start, I want to." Michael shook his head. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity," Richard insisted. "It's gratitude. You saved my daughter's life. Let me repay you." For the first time in years, Michael felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was his chance to finally prove his innocence. Back at home, Michael couldn't stop thinking about Richard's offer. It sounded too good to be true. Was this some kind of trick? Or was Richard really willing to help him? He called Emily. "Your dad seems serious about helping me." "Why?" She sighed. "Because he knows what it's like to lose everything. He built his business from scratch after losing his first company. He understands second chances." "But why me?" Michael pressed. Because you deserve it, Emily said simply. You risked your life for me. Doesn't that count for something? Michael hung up, still unsure. Accepting help meant trusting them, and trust wasn't easy for him. Meanwhile, Emily had plans of her own. She spent hours researching scholarships and programs for ex-offenders. An idea began forming in her mind, one that would change Michael's life forever. With Richard's help, Michael's case was reopened. Lawyers combed through old evidence, uncovering details that had been ignored during his original trial. Witnesses came forward who had been too afraid to speak up before. One day, Michael stood in court again, but this time he wasn't alone. Emily sat beside him, holding his hand tightly. Richard stood nearby, nodding encouragingly as the judge reviewed new evidence. Finally, the verdict came. Michael Johnson, based on the evidence presented, I hereby declare you innocent of all charges. The room fell silent for a moment. Then, cheers erupted from the small crowd gathered there. Emily hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. Richard clapped Michael on the shoulder, smiling proudly. For the first time in 7 years, Michael felt truly free. Not just from prison, but from the weight of being wrongly accused. As he walked out of the courthouse, cameras flashing around him, he couldn't believe how far he'd come. But Emily wasn't done yet. She pulled him aside later that evening. There's one more thing, she said with a mischievous grin. What now? Michael asked, laughing nervously. You'll see, she teased. That weekend, Richard hosted a dinner at his mansion to celebrate Michael's freedom. The house was grand. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and the table was set with fine china. Michael felt out of place in his jeans and hoodie, but no one treated him differently. As dessert was served, Emily stood up and cleared her throat. Everyone turned to look at her. Michael, she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. You saved my life when you didn't have to. You gave me a second chance, and now I want to give you one back. She paused, letting the words sink in. Michael frowned, confused. I've arranged for you to attend college, Emily continued. Full scholarship. Whatever program you want, wherever you want to go, it's covered. Michael stared at her, speechless. College, a dream he'd buried long ago, suddenly felt within reach. But why? He managed to ask. Because you deserve it, Emily said firmly. And because I believe in you. You're smart, brave, and kind. The world needs more people like you. Tears welled up in Michael's eyes. For so long, he'd thought his future was over. Now, it felt like it was just beginning. A year later, Michael graduated top of his class with a degree in education. He started teaching at a school for underprivileged kids, kids who reminded him of himself, kids who needed someone to believe in them. On his first day, he wrote 3 words on the board: courage, kindness, second chances. These are the things I live by, he told his students. They changed my life, and they can change yours too. After class, Emily visited him. How does it feel? She asked, smiling. Amazing, Michael admitted. I never thought I'd be here. Well, you earned it, Emily said. Every step of the way. As they walked together across the schoolyard, Michael reflected on how far he'd come. Saving Emily that rainy night hadn't just changed her life. It had changed his. Doing the right thing, even when it was hard, had brought him blessings beyond imagination. Sometimes, the smallest acts of courage lead to the greatest rewards. And Michael knew he'd spend the rest of his life paying it forward. Michael's journey wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation. From the moment he stepped out of prison, lost and broken, to the day he stood in front of a classroom full of eager students, his life became proof that doing the right thing can change everything. That rainy night in the alley didn't just save Emily's life. It gave Michael his back. It reminded him that even when the world feels dark, one act of courage can spark a chain reaction of hope, kindness, and redemption. And let's not forget Richard and Emily. Their gratitude turned into action, showing us that true wealth isn't measured by money, but by how we use it to lift others up. By helping Michael clear his name and pursue his dreams, they didn't just repay him, they multiplied the good he started. So, Here's the big takeaway. Life has a funny way of rewarding those who choose kindness over bitterness, bravery over fear, and action over indifference. What goes around really does come around, but often in ways we least expect. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever done something kind and been surprised by the outcome? Or maybe someone helped you when you needed it most? Share your stories in the comments. I'd love to read them. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales that inspire, challenge, and move you. And if you know someone who needs a reminder that second chances are possible, share this video with them. Remember, every choice matters, even the small ones. Who knows? Your next act of courage might just lead to the surprise of a lifetime. Until next time, this is Beyond Words, signing off. Keep believing, keep fighting, and above all, keep doing what's right. You never know where it might take you.